Hello, beautiful moms and entrepreneurs. This is a place where we come together to learn, grow, and inspire. So sit back, relax, and let's get started. Hello, Unbreakable Mompreneurs. My name is Sharice Walker, your host, and today I'm here with Dr. Rebecca Troy. And this is a topic that honestly I haven't had on before, but I think it's very important. So it is not going to be talking about business topics like we do. We're going to be talking more about mom and children and how to spot some signs if your children are having issues or struggling in school. So Dr. Rebecca Troy, without further ado, why don't you introduce yourself?
You got it. So I actually am founder of a company called Retrain the Dyslexic Brain, but I have a long history of dyslexia in my family. It is hereditary and something that I'm sure we'll talk about momentarily, but my brother, my parents, my aunts and uncles, cousins, a lot of people in my family with dyslexia, to include one of my own children. So it's an area that I'm certainly passionate about, and I can't wait to help other moms kind of figure this out.
You know, I didn't even know about dyslexia until I think I was in seventh grade. And one of my friends, she was really struggling in school. And finally, they tested her and found out she had dyslexia. And that was the first time I've ever heard that word, right? And obviously with her as well. And she was an avid reader, but she said that the words would just, there were so many different things. And so she'd always wear these rose-colored glasses. And so that's probably my knowledge and experience about dyslexia. So can you explain what that is?
Absolutely. And I think, just to be fair, you're not alone. I mean, I think many people, to include classroom teachers, really don't know very much about it and what it is, but it's something that's neurobiological in origin. So it's literally how the brain processes language. And so if we were to put two people side by side, one with dyslexia, one without, we wouldn't really notice a ton different when eyes are at rest. But the minute that we ask for a language task, whether it's, hey, read this word, or read this sentence, or read this paragraph, or spell this word, or write me this essay, or even recall this list of words, I am going to respond very, very differently neurologically if I have dyslexia. And so there's kind of two main areas without getting totally technical, but there's one in the back of the brain where vision is controlled that literally has little to no activity during a language task, which is why when those letters go in, the brain really just doesn't know what to do. So whether that means that there's an added letter or a reverse letter or a missing letter or maybe even an entire syllable, it's like, wow, where did you come up with that guess? And it feels a lot like guessing because in a lot of cases it is. That's because those areas in that visual, the occipital lobe where vision is controlled, are kind of missing. In addition, there's far less activity in the parietal temporal lobes, which are above the ear where we hear sounds. And so it's this intersection between what I see and what I hear and my inability to put those things together that really kind of comprises dyslexia.
So is there any cure for it?
Well, so yes, there's actually quite a bit that you can do. So I think what's been beautiful about science is that we have just learned so much about the brain as an organ and how it functions. And the better our technology gets, the more that we can see in terms of what the brain does during different tasks. But we've even learned, I mean, I was looking at a great video yesterday that was talking about people doing yoga for 20 minutes and how just even doing yoga for 20 minutes has changed brain structure. And so, yes, absolutely, you can reorganize how the brain is functioning for language so that kids can read and spell. It doesn't mean that you get rid of any of your other amazing dyslexia gifts, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But yes, you can absolutely support the brain.
That is so interesting. And I didn't even think about it until I was listening to you talk, because I have a son, he's 25 now. But if you ask him to write something down, it's like the world has ended. And it will take, I'm not joking, when he had to do math, he can do it in his head just fine. But to try to write something down, it literally 18 problems would take 18 hours. And I am not exaggerating about that. And so how do you know if he has, someone with dyslexia, what are some of the warning signs?
Yeah, that's such a great question. So, sometimes you are going to get really obvious signs, like the child might be really late to speak, or they might really struggle learning the alphabet, and any kind of written product is going to be super difficult. You might have struggles in early phonics. So let's just say you learn the word cat and all of the letters that go with it, and you spend maybe 15 minutes just really decoding this word cat. You get to the same word 2 lines later, and it's like you've never seen it before. And so it can be super frustrating for the kiddo, for the parent, for the teacher, because it's like, man, we keep doing the same thing over and over again, and we're not making any progress. So those would be warning signs. If when we're spelling, we're adding letters that don't belong, like I've got a random J or an F in there. Wow, where did this come from? Warning sign. If I'm missing sounds or I'm missing an entire syllable, that's another sign that, like, the way that my brain is actually seeing and hearing language isn't really firing the way that we would expect. The biggest one that I would say that comes up as kids age is there becomes this discrepancy between intelligence and language performance. So here's this super smart kid, you'd have a conversation with them and you're like, wow, you have so much to say and all these great ideas. But then when I ask you to do something like read by yourself or write by yourself, there is this major discrepancy between my intelligence and my present performance in language.
So I was telling you before we started about a little girl that was over at my house yesterday. Her mom works. And so because of that, her older sister's playing with my kids. And so this little girl tags along.
Yep.
And you would think that developmentally, I thought she was 4. And so when I asked how old she was, first of all, she couldn't even answer. And so someone else answered for her and she was 7. And so I'm thinking, because I was thinking maybe she's in preschool since there's preschool at this elementary school. No, she's in first grade for the second time. And I said, well, do you want to go read a book? And they said, nope, she can't read. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is your second year in first grade and she can't read. And so I said, well, let's go look at a book. She wouldn't, like, she shut down completely. And so I'm thinking, okay, lots of different things I was thinking, but one of them was, how is she in first grade for the second time, halfway through it now, really? And who's helping her? What's happening? And I'm not blaming anybody. It's just she is struggling clearly. Who can help? And so what type of resources are there available in schools, and what should the school do versus the parents versus working together as a team?
Yeah, such a great question. And the answer is really icky. It depends.
Yeah.
So when you are in some districts throughout the US, you are mandated to have early screening, which means that in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, even third grade, there is screening available and test that would tell you this is what's going on. You might have a reading difficulty, and then there are interventions that can be put in place early to support the child. In a lot of cases, people don't know what dyslexia even is. There is no such screening tool. If there are interventions or systems in the school that take place, like maybe I'm pulled out a couple of days a week, maybe I'm put in a small group with other kids that might have similar or not problems. And so I think it really, really varies a lot, but we see a lot of children come to us after 2 to 5 years of getting support, quote unquote support, and making little to no progress. So it's something that I think we could use a lot of work in terms of a greater understanding of how to discover this, how to support it, how to help children who are clearly struggling.
Just my heart goes out to all those kids because they're thinking, what's wrong with me? They just tune out. And so let's talk about some positive stuff, because now I'm kind of super sad and I'm like, I've got to go help all these kids. What what are some of the talents, and because I look at somebody who has ADHD or ADD and they are geniuses if you just
Yep.
take away them having to sit down in a classroom, right? And the
Yep.
ideas and everything. So what are some of the things that dyslexic, and I know it depends and it always varies, but what are some of those commonalities that you see kids with dyslexia have?
Absolutely. So usually a heightened creativity. The way in which they think about things is usually more divergent, and so able to see the big picture and kind of pull in a lot of ideas and simplify that message. Really great at spatial thinking, really great at lateral thinking. So a lot of engineers and people with maybe even a CEO type brain, like I've got a whole bunch of things that I have to manage, and I'm able to type them that down into one singular message. a lot of times interpersonal skills are strengthened because there's a need for reliance on people.
Mm,
And so you end up with really great leaders out of that too.
that's interesting. So it happens in the back of the brain and then on this, you said on the sides.
Yes, most often. So there are other brain regions that are involved in reading. So it's a little bit more complicated than that. But when you look at a scan of a person with dyslexia, that is the neurological difference. So we've actually seen this over 40 years of scanning, but the equipment just keeps getting better and better and better. And so I think we're expanding all the time our understanding of what is and isn't happening.
So on an MRI, you can literally see the difference between a dyslexic and
Yes,
a normal, because nothing's
yes,
normal, right?
yes, that's right. Typical. Yeah.
That is amazing, the science behind that. So you got into it because your family, right? Or what got
Yeah.
you into this industry?
So obviously it was interesting that I was the one person that didn't, but I saw firsthand like genius brother and really developed an aversion towards school and learning and studying and all of those things because it took exponentially longer for him and a whole bunch of effort. And so things that would come very easily to other kids and me were very, very difficult for him. And so I think he developed some stigma and some shame around that that really has kind of pervaded into adulthood. I mean, he's a very successful person, but it could have turned very easily to something else, which I think unfortunately it does for a lot of people. But then I was also a classroom teacher at the high school level, and it was stunning to me, my first few years in the classroom, how many kids came to me without the ability to read. And so as part of my undergraduate schooling, I had zero classes on how to teach reading because it was assumed that by the time they got to that level that they would have already known that. So it was clear to me that if I was going to continue in this role, that I needed to go back to additional schooling. And it just so happens that when I went to get a master's degree and a PhD, the woman that I studied under was one of the first people to do neuroscience scans on the brain and the differences. And so it was just like serendipity, like all of these things just fell in line. And then hereditarily, my own children being at high risk. And it was beautiful to be able to know exactly what to do for my child right out of the gate. And so my kiddo won a reading award last year at school and it's performing very, very well. But knowing about those things, knowing how to tell, intervening early really, really matters, especially from an emotional, socio-emotional place. It's just huge.
So if I'm listening to this and I'm thinking as a parent, oh my gosh, you're totally talking about my child. This is
Yeah.
incredible. What would be my next step?
Yeah, so I would, if you're unsure, I would definitely recommend a screener. So a full-blown diagnosis can be helpful, right? Especially if you think that you might have other things going on, because that can also happen, right? There can be ADHD, there can be working memory, there can be other things that it might be helpful for you to have awareness on, and that would be something that you'd get a full neuropsych evaluation. That oftentimes happens through your pediatrician, but there are specific places where you can go. The issue with that potentially is that they can be expensive. There's often a wait list of, 6 months plus, and it's a piece of paper. So you don't leave with a strategy of what to do next. You just leave with information, which can, again, be valuable. But with a screener, you have the ability to know with more certainty that, yes, I'm at risk. And so there's a great, I'll send you a link of how to use this screener, but you can also go to our website at drrebeccatroy.com, and on the top of that page, there's a link to a screener. It's only going to take you 20 minutes, but it's a phonological awareness assessment, it's a reading assessment, it's a spelling assessment that are going to tell you with certainty, like I've got 3 data points now, plus all of these other behavioral things that we teach you. This is what I'm looking for. Do I see yes, 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 yes? And if so, it can be a really important tool then to say, I better think about getting some support because it looks like the signs are pointing to, yes, we do have this.
So what if me as a listener is listening to this and going, oh my gosh, I've been going through this my whole life. This is what I'm struggling with. Is there an age limit on this screening or what?
No. So the test is normed for age 5 to 99. If your child is younger than 5, there is a subtest that's younger. So you just email us and say, hey, my kiddo's younger than 5 and I want to test, and we would be happy to give you the other version of it. That's for younger kids. But the brain does change a little bit in how it learns by 25. So before 25, we have both active and passive plasticity. And so our brains are a little bit more sponge-like, and it's easier for us to learn things. The brain is still malleable for adults. So please don't think if you're an adult listening and this is like, you're describing me. Yes, you can still do something about this. It's just going to be that you have to be explicit about it, and the repetition is really important.
I love this because I do believe there's a lot of people out there that's just like, seriously, why can't, and they
Yeah,
would,
and they didn't know.
yeah, like my friend that I told you about at the beginning, it took her, I think, 20 years to get her bachelor degree, but she did it, like, because
Yes.
she took one class at a time. But you know
Yep.
what? I think that is phenomenal that she was so dedicated, and she did take some time off too, but she accomplished a goal. She just realized she had to, because she hasn't had that help, that she just had to take it slower. So
Yeah.
it's
Yep.
amazing.
I think, it's such a great point that anything is possible. You can do anything you put your mind to, but there can be ways to make it easier. And so that early awareness is really kind of best practice. And, you can't blame yourself if you didn't know you didn't know. But when you know, I think that there are some really great ways to support the brain in learning how to use those areas that we just didn't know about back when probably you or I were going through school, that it just wasn't a thing back then.
So, how much do schools help? Could you say, because I know with my son, it took me 5 years actually. I kept requesting help every single year. Like, can you please test for this or can you please test for that? Because I didn't have a good pediatrician and I didn't know they were my first. And so,
Yeah.
is there help through the schools that can do this? You mentioned screening, but more than that.
So unfortunately, it depends.
Yeah.
It's not the greatest answer, but it's true. So the school psychologist does have a lot of screening tools available to them in most cases. Some schools, unfortunately, they don't provide those kind of tests for the school psych, but that would be part of a special education evaluation, is to do an intelligence test. And then there's also some language metrics, reading tests, writing tests. And so again, anytime that you have those data points where I've got the discrepancy between intelligence and language skills, I do have the ability to say, whoa, wait a second here. IQ's way up here, but we're functioning very, very low in some of these areas. And if the person knows enough to say, that's dyslexia, this is it, then they can maybe move into support. But oftentimes people don't know that that's what it is. And then again, it depends on whether or not the school has adequate support. Um, what we find is that we get the best results by giving these supports to families. So we give it right to mom and we say, okay, mom, and in some cases, dad or grandma and grandpa, but here's what you need to do for 10 to 15 minutes every day. And if you give this repetitively to the brain, then suddenly we have these massive changes in 4 to 6 months, as opposed to years and years of going to the same tutoring support and barely making any progress.
Yeah, because it's masses versus individualized. Okay, so what do you do? And if I'm listening, like ready to jump out of my seat because I'm like, oh my gosh, this is me, this is my child. How do they get a hold of you, or what do you do?
Yep, great question. So if you go to drrebeccatroy.com, it'll have everything that you will need in order to reach us. So that screener will be up at the top. There's also a free webinar that really just walks through some of the 5 shifts that you need to make in order to get the brain functioning differently. And so if you're brand new to this and you're like, I just need to learn, that would be a great watch. It's about 45 minutes, and I would highly recommend that. If you know that you have already been struggling and you've been doing tutoring and you're not making any progress, we offer complimentary calls through our team to see if it would be a fit. And so then I would recommend that you just connect with the team and say, hey, you know what, I was listening and I think that this might be a fit. And the team will really help you to see if you are, in fact, a candidate for the support that we offer.
I love that. Great. So any questions I didn't ask you that I should?
No, but I mean, I think something that could be really helpful is I'll just mention that it can be hard as a parent to have a child who struggles with anything. It doesn't matter what it is. And so sometimes it's just really good to hear hopeful stories and be inspired by what is possible. So we have made this super intentional effort to interview. So every other week we interview a mom or a dad or a grandma or grandpa, and we say, tell us your story of what it looked like before and tell us what it looked like now after you've received support. And I think that that would be just such an amazing place to go. So we've got it on that same website I was telling you before. It's also on YouTube. It's on a lot of our social media, but I would just inspire yourself, especially if it feels kind of heavy and dark, like, it's never going to get better. I promise you it can.
It's true. As long as you keep fighting. I think that's the thing is that if you feel like something's off, keep going. And that can be in any.
Trust your instinct.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is somebody out there. You just have to keep searching. It might take a little effort.
Yeah, got it.
Okay, so I want to switch real quick. I love to talk about moms as well and your momhood type. And so I know that you have children. I want you to imagine yourself sitting on a park bench, and this 9-month pregnant woman sits next to you, and this is her first baby. And so you help mothers, you've seen the gamut, you've been around. What is one piece of advice that you would give that new mom? And it doesn't have to be just as a new mom, like newborn baby type, any stage.
Yeah, I would say trust your instincts. You know your baby better than anybody. So sometimes you can get a lot of advice from people that are like, oh, that'll get better. Oh, there's nothing wrong. Everything's fine. Oh, it's a boy. They're going to grow out of that. You always know. I would say every single mom that we have ever worked with has always known deep inside, like there's something going on here that I need to look into. Just trust that. At the same time as like, you know, your child and the amazing gifts and the light that they have inside of them, and continue to make that flourish. Put all of your energy and love and light in believing in them and their capacity, because you as mom know best.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, you got it. Thanks for having me.
And moms and Unbreakable Mompreneurs, you heard exactly the great advice that I totally agree with is, you know yourself, you know your child. And if you are feeling like there's some struggle, there's some overwhelm, that it could be different, then go fight for that. And especially if you feel like you see the warning signs about dyslexia, then definitely go to drrebeccatroy.com and go out and make it a great day. Beautiful moms, remember, you are unbreakable. Keep illuminating the world with your strength, pursuing your dreams, and reveling in the splendor of motherhood. This is Cherise Walker, bidding you farewell for now. Stay tuned for more empowering conversations on the next episode of the Unbreakable Mompreneurs podcast. Until then, keep shining bright. Signing off with love, Cherise Walker.